Hi, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Packers Unscripted. From Packers.com, I am Mike Spofford, joined by my partner in crime, Weston Hodkowitz. We're coming to you here from different locations at Lambeau Field. Wes, OTAs for 2023 are officially over. There is 1 week left of the Packers offseason program, and it is the mandatory minicamp coming up this week. We will have access to practice when the Packers are on the field, press conferences, locker room interviews, all of that stuff. So let's talk about maybe a couple of storylines to watch here heading into minicamp as the offseason program wraps up in a few days. What's on your mind?
Well, first and foremost, we'll get Jaire Alexander and Rasul Douglas back in the building. And that's going to be such a pivotal piece of this defense with, everything that the Packers accomplished late last season, looking to kind of, use that as a leapfrog now into 2023. I thought, for as difficult of a midseason stretch as Green Bay went through, they found some answers in the middle of towards the final stretch that season. One of them was in a now two-time All-Pro Jaire Alexander, and the other was in Rasul Douglas, who ended up getting, I think, 3 more interceptions to his total in the month of December. There was actually a statistic that I saw, Mike. I believe it was from Pro Football Focus. I want to make sure, or maybe it was the 33rd team, but both Jaire and Rasul, the last 2 seasons, leading the National Football League right now in the month of December interceptions. So it showed you, I thought, how far that secondary came during the final month of the season. And certainly having both of those 2 guys back here for the mandatory practices, I think will increase and heighten sort of the sense of urgency there with the Packers defense.
Yeah, and I think it'll provide a little bit more of a challenge for Jordan Love as the Packers offense is continuing this transition to a new starting quarterback with the defense presumably at full strength, although Rashawn Gary is not expected to be back just yet. I don't think Eric Stokes will be back on the field, or certainly not in team drills. If Matt LaFleur had indicated that maybe by the end of the offseason program, Stokes might start doing some individual drills, but the 11-on-11, I'm sure is still quite a ways off for him. But that added challenge, I think, for Jordan Love will be interesting to watch in practice this week as well. And on top of that, then Keyshawn Nixon settling in as that primary nickel corner with, as you said, Alexander and Douglas both on the outside. Another thing I'm going to keep an eye on, just because, in the 3 practices during OTAs, the 1 per week that we were able to watch, we did not see any field goal kicking periods with the new rookie kicker, Anders Carlson, the 6th round pick out of Auburn. Now that we're going to get multiple practices within the same week, I will be very curious if we do get to watch the rookie from Auburn potentially kick some field goals, or maybe kick off in a special teams drill. Just, we haven't actually seen his legs, so to speak, just yet since he's put on a Packers uniform. So I think that's something to watch. And as always, keeping an eye on the depth chart with special teams as well, because with everybody that's presumably going to be here and on the field for the mini camp this week, it sort of sets things up in terms of how we can maybe expect to see the special teams depth chart starting at training camp when the players come back at the end of July.
Yeah, and it stands to reason that if you look at the safety position or maybe some of these other posts, that, the rotation's just going to set up a certain way. And I could see the Packers coaching staff saying that. But it is telling when you go on that first practice field, when Rasul Douglas, Jaire Alexander, the starters are going to be back there. How do all the pieces fit? Who is the safety back there with Darnell Savage? What offensive line configuration do they go with? Is David Bakhtiari out there, or is it going to be another situation where maybe Caleb Jones gets some work there and they want to focus on Yosh Nijman being at right tackle? All of those things are what we're going to have to be monitoring. I think the most exciting part of the offseason program, or the end of the offseason program, is, as you said, Mike, getting a feel of where this team is going to be at and what will amount to the final run through before we come back at the end of July. And I always go back to thinking about, Eddie Lacy and the progress that he made during his first 9 weeks in Green Bay. I think about, guys like Micah Hyde and Romeo Doubs, guys that came out and impressed right away as rookies, and then were able to carry it over into the training camp. This is the starting point of everything. And in addition to that, guys on the offensive side of the ball, they've now had a full program with Jordan Love, their starting quarterback for 2023. I think that's really exciting. And I think when you're building out the identity of your football team for a season, and everybody knows how young Green Bay is going to skew, everybody is on the same page and pulling in the right direction now going into the month of July.
Yeah, I think another thing to watch too, because it was with what we had witnessed last week in practice with regard to the 2-minute drill. Sean Clifford, the rookie 5th-round pick out of Penn State, led a very impressive 2-minute drive, some clutch catches, including the touchdown to win the drill for the offense by young receiver Jeff Cotton. And so I'll be curious this week as we look at the reps. Obviously, we're mostly watching, the first units. But where exactly is the backup quarterback situation? Is Sean Clifford the number 2? Is Danny Etling the number 2? Where are things going to go? What are things going to be looking like when that first training camp practice rolls around? And we may get a hint this week in these last few days of the offseason work.
Yeah, and I have to smirk a little bit, as you mentioned the part about Jeff Cotton being a young receiver. You're absolutely right. There's nothing inaccurate. He's the oldest receiver on the roster.
Oldest receiver in Green Bay. Absolutely right. But yes, he's still a young receiver.
Like
Sorry.
25. No, but I mean, it's still like 25 years old or whatever. I mean, just remarkable that's where the Packers are right now. But to get back to your point, Sean Clifford, man, now you've seen him more. I know people that have watched the Badgers have seen him more. I haven't seen a lot of Sean Clifford to this point. I was so impressed by that guy and how he handled the 2-minute period. I thought he showed a live arm. And as Matt LaFleur said in his post-practice press conference, say that 5 times fast or 4, the guy showed the ability to not only know where the sticks are, make the right decisions, but then he even tried a couple passes. I think of that deep corner for 24 yards, I believe. Was that the one to Heath?
Might have been.
Malik Heath.
Heath. Yeah.
The guy going down the field, I think it was 7 of 9 on that series, and then being able to cap it with the 8-yard touchdown to Cotton. That's what Sean Clifford has to do. You and I got a chance to meet him a little bit, be around him. I mean, he is a very confident young man. He's a guy that, and I say confident in every sense of the word correctly, a guy that has been the face of a Big Ten Power 5 football conference team for 3-4 years. So he is not going to be, one that's going to he's not going to want to shy away from the bright lights, even though it's just a training camp practice. He's going to be able to go out there and do it. And honestly, Mike, I thought Danny Etling made a couple nice throws in this offseason program as well. So watching that competition, because that's a big thing, man. I mean, I know there's going to be the emergency quarterback rule back this year. So it's not going to be just, okay, who's inactive, who's active.
Yeah.
But it still matters who that number 2 is and who's the guy that's going to potentially be stepping up in case of emergency. And I think Sean Clifford, when you look at guys like Matt Flynn and the number of rookies and young players that came into Green Bay, Brett Hundley being one of them as well, there is a role to be had there right off the bat if you can prove that you're worthy of it.
Yeah, I'm really interested to watch Clifford moving forward here, not only this week in minicamp, but then into training camp. For all the talk during the draft about, did the Packers draft him too early? Maybe maybe they could have just gotten him as an undrafted free agent and all that. You set all that aside. Sean Clifford played in Happy Valley in front of 95,000 people. He's played at the Horseshoe. He's played at Camp Randall. This is not a young man who's going to shy away from a challenge, and the challenge put in front of him to nail down as best he can the number 2 job behind Jordan Love and potentially beat out Danny Etling, who's who hasn't played regular season football yet, but has certainly played his share in the preseason and impressed the Packers last year, which is why Danny Etling is still around.
Absolutely. And again, one of the older, more veteran players on this team, if that's the metric that you're trying to hit. I just want to close on this really quickly. If you're someone that actually is debating whether or not a 5th-round pick was drafted too high, I think you need to find a new hobby. Would be my only suggestion. If we're going to critique day 3 picks and where guys went or didn't go, you could take, outside of what, maybe a long snapper in the 5th round. I don't know if there's really a huge debate to be had there as far as from 5th to 7th, exactly where guys go, other than to have something to complain about, I guess.
Yeah, and I can tell you who really doesn't care, and that's Sean Clifford, because he's here to just play some football and try to nail down a roster spot here with the Green Bay Packers as a rookie quarterback. So a little bit of sponsor business here, Wes. Sirius XM NFL Radio delivers hard-hitting analysis and up-to-the-minute NFL news that true football fanatics need 24/7, 365. And at Cousin Subs, we have something for everyone, like our Wisconsin cheese curds, mac and cheese, golden fries, and creamy shakes, all paired with your favorite sub or sub in a bowl. Cousin Subs, 50 years of better. Another thing, sort of topic of interest from OTAs that we haven't had a chance to touch on yet, although you have a story on our website for those who like to dive in and check out a few more details. But second-year pro Tariq Carpenter, drafted in the 7th round a year ago as a safety, the Packers have actually moved him to inside linebacker. He's now part of the group of depth there behind starters Campbell and Walker with Isaiah McDuffie, Eric Wilson. Tariq Carpenter is now in that mix. He established himself last year as a rookie as a special teams regular, and that you would expect is going to continue. But in terms of his opportunity to potentially get snaps on defense, sounds like the Packers are going to see what he brings a little bit closer to the line of scrimmage than where we saw him last year.
Yeah, I remember back in 10 years ago now when they got Sean Richardson as an undrafted free agent, former teammate of Casey Hayward at the Vanderbilt University. I remember thinking, man, this is a really big safety. Tariq Carpenter is like a bigger version of Sean Richardson.
Yeah.
I remember there was a couple times, I think I even said it to you in the locker room, some of the availabilities last season. I'm like, that guy, that's not a safety. I mean, the rules have changed. Certainly there's more hybrids at that position, and in a box safety versus an inside linebacker, what's really the difference?
Right.
But he looks like a linebacker in terms of just his frame. Maybe he has to put some more weight on. I don't know what the Packers are going to ask from him in that department, but the size is prototypical, I think, for an inside backer. And you go by listed weights, which isn't everything, but from a size and weight perspective, he's basically smaller than Devondre Campbell. And that's pretty much it in terms of the inside linebackers. You know, he has 3 inches on Isaiah McDuffie and also a couple pounds in the listed category. And McDuffie, as we've seen, is a more than capable special teamer, and then also been the Mike in a few instances too. So I get what the Packers were getting at with this guy. The thing you have to understand with the Packers, and I was thinking about this long and hard when I was writing the story, whether it was Mike McCarthy or Matt LaFleur, I think it's probably maybe a little bit more emblematic of the front office as well. When the Packers bring in a guy that could potentially be a tweener, they're going to play him at his college position first. That's just been the way they've done it. And then if they feel like there needs to be an adjustment made, they'll do it after that and give him an opportunity to get comfortable at a new spot. And for Tariq Carpenter's standpoint, this has been a completely new language and education. He's in the same playbook, but he's basically reading it differently. And there have been some rough times that have come along with that, but he credited Devondre Campbell for being an excellent resource for him, somebody that he can go to, whether it's just trying to get advice, whether it's getting a little bit of a confidence boost, feeling like this can be his position. Because the other aspect of it is I think the Packers have a really elite prospect with special teams. His size, his speed, everything you look for in a coverage, in a flexible body type that can help you in multiple phases. It's there with Tariq Carpenter. It's mostly about now figuring out, okay, where can we rep him defensively? And as we learned with him playing a little bit outside linebacker last year, some of the techniques that you teach him at those defensive positions and how that can potentially help you on special teams. Case in point, outside linebacker, edge rush, also being a potential punt blocker. All that stuff is married together. So he's taken it right on, head on this offseason. And if you look at it with the amount of depth and experience now that they have at safety, and in the fact in the inside linebacker room, Chris Barnes was non-tendered, the case can be made that the better opportunity with making this 53 resides in that ILB room.
Yeah, I think so, and we certainly expect to see Carpenter continue that special teams role. But it sounds like the young man is very excited about the position switch and the opportunity that may be in front of him here in his second season with Green Bay. One other player I want to touch on before we sign off and get ready to head out to cover practice for a mini camp a veteran player. We haven't talked about him much this offseason. He's been, somewhat quiet, but he's always been a little bit quiet since he got here. But now he really has established himself. He's an entrenched defensive leader on this team. And we've talked about other guys in that regard, Kenny Clark, Jair Alexander, but Preston Smith is a guy. I tell you, he spoke to reporters after practice last week, the one that we attended. And there's absolutely nothing about Preston Smith that would indicate that he will shy away at all from the leadership responsibilities that are thrust upon him. But he also doesn't shy away from acknowledging that the defense came up short last year. And while he's not going to go into, what went wrong, chapter and verse, he's not interested in the details and talking about it. The players have all gone over it. They've gone over it with the coaches. They know. And he's acknowledged the shortcomings on defense, but it's all about looking forward. It's not just putting last year in the rearview mirror. It's like the rearview mirror doesn't even exist. And I can appreciate that approach because Preston Smith has been there, done that in this league. Right. And he came in, he was sort of second fiddle to Zadarius Smith and all the Smith Bros things for a couple of years, which was great and all, but he's had to grow into a new role here in Green Bay, and one that he didn't really have in Washington in the 4 years that he was there. And I think the young players in that locker room, appreciate where Preston Smith is coming from. And he even says that he appreciates guys, whether it's Kingsley Enagbari or Lucas Van Ness, the new first-round draft pick at his position, coming to him and asking him questions. And he feels good about being able to help these guys out and not just send them back to the coach to get their answers. We're seeing the evolution of a veteran player who's embracing everything that this coaching staff and the front office is asking him to do. And it's been fun to watch and fun to get to know Preston Smith.
It really has, Mike. And he's the guy too, that he will be a captain. He'll be a leader, and he doesn't necessarily just need to wear the C on his chest. Who knows? Maybe he will this season, but I mean, he's a guy that I think silently behind closed doors without drawing much attention to himself. He's been doing this since 2019. I think we just caught on to it a little bit later. And now at this point in time, as you mentioned with that interview with media, he recognizes he is the oldest player on defense. And I think now probably the third longest tenured player on the defensive side of the ball behind Kenny Clark and Jair Alexander. So the responsibilities that go with that, he does not shy away from them. And also, just seeing the way he interacts with the guys, I'm working on a little bit of a story on him right now that I was waiting down in the locker room to talk with him about before I came up here, and just seeing how he interacts with Darnell Savage and young players, veteran players, the guy really can step into any conversation and hold his own. And I think the relatability of him has been such a breath of fresh air for this locker room. And when you talk about making a big transition, both defensively and as a football team, Preston Smith's going to be a big part of that. The other thing I think that needs to be talked about very quickly is he's a guy that when you look at the totality of his career, can be really easy, I should say, to overlook everything he's accomplished and achieved. When you talk about signing a free agent, Mike, the investment you're making in a guy coming into the building and you don't really maybe know him, I don't know if there's a better investment than Preston Smith. I mean, a guy that has been historically durable at a position in which durability doesn't always go hand in hand. And he's missed one game, I think, and during his time with the Packers to break up his consecutive games played streak, which I think was around 100 or 102. So yeah,
that's the only game he's missed in his entire career, including the 4 years in Washington. And he didn't want to miss it either. It really hurt him to have to miss a game. Yeah. Cause he takes a heck of a lot of pride in that durability and showing up for his teammates and his coaches every Sunday. And he's done that. He's done that now for 8 years with only missing one game along the way. It's pretty remarkable. And on top of that, I think including playoffs now, I think he's up to 62, 63 sacks in his career, if you include his postseason numbers. So he's put together quite a career, and he's still going strong here in Green Bay by all accounts.
And as steady as they go from a performing standpoint. So the Packers, obviously last year, they lost Rashawn Gary. That was a big hit. Preston stepped his game up. He stepped his leadership up to get the young guys up to, to par, being able to welcome in a guy like Justin Hollins and get him producing. And now this year you get Lucas Van Ness in that room. And as you said, Michael, when you want to learn how to be a professional in the National Football League and a young 21-year-old and impressionable kid like that, I don't think you could find a better guy to learn from than Preston Smith.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll be excited to watch him. He did also talk about sort of breaking the curse of the even year, odd year thing because of the way his sack statistics.
He said he was going to do it
his career. And he did, because in 2022, he had 8.5 sacks, and he had not had, I believe his high watermark in an even numbered year was like 4.5 in his career. And then all of his like 9 sack and his career high 12 sacks in Green Bay, those were all in the odd numbered years. Well, he finally got over that hump, and he followed up a 9 sack season in 2021 with 8.5 sacks in 2022. So he feels like the curse is broken. That's it. It's done and over with.
Dude, and if you ever want a better example of why sacks aren't the only thing to measure a pass rusher on, go back to 2019 and Brian Gutekunst signing him to a pretty lucrative contract, right? After a 4-sack season in Washington.
One of the first free agents to sign, amongst all of them.
Yeah, Packers weren't concerned about the sack total that year. They liked what they saw from the pressure standpoint. And certainly I think he's a guy that, you can always count on Preston for his production, in addition to the fact that he always sets a pretty good edge too.
Yeah, absolutely. He's an all-around player against the run and against the pass. And as you said, steady as they come. So with that, we will call it a wrap on this edition of Packers Unscripted. Be sure to follow all of our coverage of the team's minicamp this week as the offseason program wraps up. We will have it all for you on Packers.com. For Wes, I am Mike. Thank you for tuning in, everybody, and we will see you next time.